All right, good morning. It's hard to believe that we are now leaving the Durham behind and picking up with Maseches Nazir. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. Um, the
I looked at the first Mishnah. It's not clear we're leaving Nadarim behind.
That is true. That is true. And indeed, of course, we saw that as a reminder from what we saw in Nedarim, when one makes a vow to become a Nazir, which is considered a neder, one is forbidding oneself from consuming grapes or products from grapes, e.g. the wine or grape seeds, cutting one's hair, and specifically from your head, and becoming tameh to a dead human body, so tummy mate. So those are the three prohibitions that are associated with it. And so you're absolutely right. We're not really leaving the Durham because a neder is by definition a prohibition on oneself from something. And so too, Nazirut is a prohibition on oneself from these certain things. So let's just go over some of the key concepts. So in the beginning of Nedarim, we saw that, obviously one could simply say, I am a Nazir to become a Nazir. There are also other possible things that one could say to become a Nazir. And we're going to actually be discussing that as our first topic today. The fact that, we saw, again, at the very beginning of Nedarim, that there are what are known as kinuyim for Nedarim, that are like nicknames for Nedarim, meaning that you could say other things and it can imply a neder. So that was, like konam for korban, and there were other things that could be said as well. And then similarly, there's shorthand, what are known as yadot, we saw, and we'll see again, that the phrase yadot is like the handle of a pot. When you pick up the handle of a pot, the rest of the pot comes with it. So too, when you say an initial statement, even though you didn't include a full sentence, the rest of the sentence comes with it, so that if it's clear what your intention is, and the question of exactly how clear is a machlokas, but it needs to be. But in any event, when it's clear what your intention is, so then you'll become a Nazir, even though you didn't say, I want to be a Nazir. You only said, I want to be, or something along those lines. And we'll see that in the first Mishnah as well. Then, as a reminder, we saw that a vow of Nazirut was considered both one of a vow of the wicked and a vow of the righteous, which highlights that motivation matters. And indeed, we saw a story in which was it Shimon? I think it was Shimon who says that that in fact that the only time he ever saw Shimon HaTzadik, the only time he ever saw a righteous Nazir was he saw a Nazir and he asked him what the story was. And the Nazir said that, listen, I was looking at my reflection, saw how handsome I was, and I realized that I was going to be tempted for sin. And so as a result, I decided that I should become a Nazir. And so that was a situation where Shimon HaTzadik said that would be an appropriate motivation. But if you're just trying to, quote unquote, get closer to God through restricting yourself and not cutting your hair and not becoming tameh, so that's not necessarily the most appropriate thing to do. That's not the right necessary motivation, and that could actually be a vow of the wicked. And as we saw, that may be in part of the explanation for why you have to offer a sin offering at the end of your time being a Nazir. In any event, we noted at the very end of Maseches Nedarim, indeed, in connection with one of the last Mishnayos, we noted that you can annul a vow of Nazirut like other Nedarim. We'll see that there's an exception to that in this introduction. I'll highlight that in a moment. So we also saw at several points over the course of our learning Nedarim that one cannot become a partial Nazir, meaning you can't say that you want to be a Nazir except that you want to be able to drink wine, or you can't say that you want to be Nazir except that you want to be able to cut your hair. It does turn out, however, that you can be a Nazir as such that you can become tameh mate, and that is called a Nazirot Shimshon. So a Nazirot Shimshon, a Shimshon type Nazir. Obviously, Shimshon did come in contact with lots of dead people, particularly the dead people that he created, but in any event that he caused. But although I guess most of them were not Jewish, so there's the question of whether that would be covered. But in any event, the bottom line is that there is an alternative class of Nazirut, and indeed there are 4 different categories of Nazirut that we will see over the course of our learning together. One is Stam Nazirut. Stam Nazirut is just a 30-day period. That's the shortest period. You can't do a Nazir for less than 30 days. So if you try to do a Nazir for less than 30 days, you end up being a Nazir for 30 days. Then you can have a Nazirut set for a period that's longer than 30 days, or multiple series of Nazirut periods. Then there's a Nazir Olam or a Nazir Le'olam. That's somebody where, again, one becomes a traditional Nazir and continues for the rest of the life. And indeed, if somebody were to try to become a Nazir today, that would be their case, because the only way you can end your Nazirut is by offering various korbanot. And so since you can't offer those korbanot today, you know, there's essentially no way to end your Nazirut. And then finally, there's the Nazir of Shimshon. And this is also a permanent Nazirut, and one is not able to annul this kind of Nazirut. And again, it's all the prohibitions except for the prohibition about Tumat Mate. So what happens if one becomes Tameh during the course of being a Nazir? Just, again, this is just a quick overview of the rules associated with Nazirut. So one has to offer various sacrifices and restart their Nazirut period. And then at the end of the Nazirut, the Nazir shaves his head, offers a set of 3 sacrifices, a male lamb as an olah, a female lamb as a chatat, and a ram as a shlamim. And then all of these things will be discussed in more detail during our journey together through Maseches Nazir. So that is that. Now let's take a look at the daf, at the first daf. And when we take a look at the first daf, it looks just like what we remember before we learned the Durham. It looks like we've got Tosos on the left-hand side and Rashi on the right-hand side. However, if you take a look at the little aleph that is after the word kol in the Rashi on the inner, and again, as is usual, Tosos is on the outer edges of the page, and Rashi is on the inner edges of the page. But again, if you take a look at the aleph that is right in Rashi, right after the first word of the top Rashi, if we take a look, that goes to the Nuschot Rabbeinu Yehuda ben Rabbeinu Natan. And it says in that aleph, Kisvei Yad Katuv, in the handwritten documents, it's written, B'tchila b'zeh haloshen, with this language, Perish Maseches Nazir LeRabbeinu Yehuda bar Natan. So this is not Rashi; it's Rabbi Yehuda bar Natan, known as the Rivan, and Rabbi Yehuda bar Natan was the son-in-law of Rashi. Rashi had daughters, and one of them married Rabbi Yehuda bar Natan. Now, so that's important to know. And so as a result, we won't necessarily call this, I may accidentally call it Rashi, but we're going to be more careful. There are other opinions that say that this might be a different parish, but in any event, the bottom line is that when people cite Rashi, it doesn't seem to be this text. And so although there was a Rashi on Maseches Nazir, it doesn't seem like it was. We don't have it in our Gemaras, and so that is something important to know. What we do have that. No, this note is not. This note is not written by. This is an editor's note that says that in a handwritten version of this document, this is what we found. Okay. So then the parish that we do have that does continue with us from Maseches Nedarim is the Rush. So if you take a look on the left-hand side of the page, this will be in general on the outer side of the page. You can see it says Parish Harush, and so that will be a nice accompaniment with us during the course of our learning together, and we will often turn to the Rush as we will do several points during the course of today's learning. Okay, so we noted that was the introduction, and now we noted that we begin by referencing different ways that one can refer to Nazirut and make oneself a Nazir. And again, this is just as we had at the beginning of Nadarim. We're going to reference two different alternatives: Kinuyem, Kinuye, nicknames, and Yadot, shorthands. So those are the two, basically Kinuyim is when you use words that we understand to reference Nazirut. So we'll see what those words are shortly. And Yadot is where you use abbreviated sentences that, due to the context, can be understood to refer to a Nazir. So what do we start with? So Kol Kinuya Nazirus, Kanazirus, any kind of nickname for Nazirut is considered, and if it's understood to mean Nazirut, it can be equal to a Nazirut. However, now we're going, one might have thought that, okay, so the next line will be an example of such a kinui, as such a nickname. But we say ha'omer ahei, if you say that it's on this, or I shall be, so then Harei Zen Nazir. So thankfully the Rush helps us out. So if we take a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Rush, on the outer edge of the page, Ha'omer ahei Harei Zen Nazir. Lavle Perushi Kinuye Kaasi. This is not coming to explain what that or give an example of a kinui, of a nickname. Eliyad Leneder Habi. This is an example of a yad, of a shorthand. Kamo ha'ochaz hakli. And now the Rush offers the analogy that I mentioned in the introduction. It's like one who holds on to a pot, beves yad, using its handle shalo, hakli ola imo. That just when you pick it up, even though you're only holding the handle, the rest of the thing goes with it. Hachinami lab neder mamish havi. The words of what you say is not actually a neder. No one could possibly understand it as a neder because you didn't say anything about the underlying subject. Ella mashmaut katsat lashon neder. However, the implication, a little bit of the language, is that it's like a neder. Rabbeinu kara Rabbeinu kra lemahavi neder mamish, and we derive from a verse that we're going to treat it like an actual neder. Okay, so that is, somebody says I shall be, so that it could end up as a Nazir, and we will mention and discuss that case at the end of the day today. But the next case we will discuss tomorrow. Oh, hey, na'eh, or I want to be handsome, or I shall be handsome. So again, we're going to understand that as Nazir, that person is a Nazir. Now, actually, that word Nazir right here, I just explained it as being after Oahei Na'eh, but you can also, some people understand it as part of, and you can see in the Divrei Hamaskil of the fourth Tosos that he understands the Nazir to go with the next few words of Nazir, Nazik, Naziach, Paziach. And that is, now we're actually turning to the nicknames. So in addition to Nazir, you have the following nicknames that you can use instead of Nazir: Nazik, Naziach, Paziach. So Harei Zen Nazir. So then in all those cases, that would constitute a case of Nazirut. And if we take a look at the next Rush, so the Rush says, Ha'omer ahei na'eh Harei Zen Nazir. If a person says, I want to be, I'm sorry, I go down to the next Rush. Nazik, Naziach, Paziach, Harei Zen Nazir, Hainu Kinui. These are the nicknames. So what we did in our Mishnah, and we'll ask about it in our Gemara, is we said nicknames work. Then we gave examples of Yadot, and then we finally talked about Kinuyim, talked about nicknames. And in Maseches Nedarim, we explained why it is that nicknames work. And we offered two different explanations. Tosos reminds us of them here. We won't go through the whole Tosos, but the two sources are Rabbi Yochanan, who said that actually these are just translations of the word Nazir into other languages, and that's why kinuyim work in connection with Nedarim. It's you're just saying it in English, for example, and so as a result, all languages would work. But these languages happen to be particularly clear because the language looks so much like the word Nazir. So as a result, that's why these are referenced. Sorry?
Looks like the word Nazir.
If you take away the top of the pay, then the pay could become like a nun, and then just like Naziach, you take away the left hand side of the chet, it becomes like a resh. So it's not, it's not quite a homonym, but again, parts of it, if you change the word just a little bit, it's not hard to see how one could read it as Nazir. Right, a lookanim. All right. So anyway, so the point is that you can have it. So that was Rabbi Yochanan's position, and Reish Lakish said no. These words were chosen by the rabbis. That these are not. There's no other language where nazik means nazir. These alternatives were chosen by the rabbis, and the rabbi said, "Look, we want there to be other mechanisms so that you can avoid accidentally saying Hashem's name." Now, that the context in which one might say Hashem's name is really in connection with offering a sacrifice. That if one were to say, Korban la Hashem, so that's what they were worried that people might just say La Hashem, and they won't reference the Korban, and they won't actually have accomplished anything, and they'll have taken God's name in vain. And so as a result, that's why the rabbis offered these alternatives, because you'd be less likely to quote a pasuk and then come to the possibility of trying to do a shorthand for the pasuk by just using God's name. So here now we have other words, and so other words will help us avoid the problem. That was what Reish Lakish said in Maseches Nedarim. And again, the point is that it doesn't for our purposes at the moment. You can go with either approach, and of course we want both approaches to fit into our Gemara, into our Mishnah, so that both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish can be consistent. So with it. So now we've dealt with the kinuyim. So now we go back and say other kinds of languages that will work. So if one says Hareini Kazeh, I want to be like this guy. Hareini Misalsel. I want to be misal. I want to, I'm hereby misalsel, and we'll define that tomorrow. Hareini mechalkel. I'm hereby mechalkel. Again, we'll define that tomorrow. These we'll cover, God willing, in Gemara tomorrow. Harei alayla shalach pera, or I've got an obligation to grow tresses. So again, we'll deal with that, God willing, tomorrow. So in all of those situations, Harei zen Nazir, the person will end up being a Nazir. Harei alay tziporim, it's an obligation for me to offer birds. Well, then Rabbi Meir Omer Nazir, v'chachamim Omerein Nazir. No, so then the birds, which is one of the potential sacrifices that are connected with Nazir. So then Rabbi Meir says that person is a Nazir, and the Chacham is saying no, that person's not a Nazir. Okay, so that is our Mishnah, and so now the Gemara is going to begin by wondering a question that all of you may be wondering, which is why in the world is Nazirut in Seder Nashim? Meaning, we understood why Nedarim was in Seder Nashim, because at the end of the day, a very significant part of Maseches Nedarim is dealing with the father's and husband's ability to annul the daughter's or wife's vow. And so as a result, it makes sense. There's a very significant piece that relates to women. And so as a result, we can understand why Nedarim is in Nashim. But Nazirut, Nazirut has more to do with korbanot and holiness, etc. Why isn't it in Kudshim? So that's the question that we're going to begin with. So Michti, ton of
Part of Nidara.
what?
Part of Nidara.
Well, yeah, that's another way, another good question. Meaning, well, why do we need a separate Masechah? Now, could just be that it's it's got a whole bunch of chapters. We're gonna have there are 2 volumes in the art scroll, and so we didn't want to make Nadarim a 4-volume set. But in any event, and there's a possibility of distinguishing it. But but you still ask a good question, meaning, why should it be separate? But here, and indeed, I think the answer that we're going to offer does address that as well. So, Tana b'Seder Nashim Kai, we're learning this in Seder Nashim. My time at Tani Nazir. Why, that's what we're doing right now. We're learning Seder Nashim. Why in the world are we learning about Nazirut? So Tana Akrakai. So the point is that we're trying to highlight the following teaching. That what does it say in Dvarim Kaf Dalid Pasuk Aleph? It says Vahaya imlosim tzachein be'inav kimatzava ervas davar. That if it happens that she does not find favor in his eyes because he's discovered something concerning her, some kind of erva, some kind of inappropriate behavior. Here it translates it as adultery. Doesn't necessarily meaning some kind of erva can refer to other things as well. But the point is there's some kind of inappropriate action that he's found. And this is what now we're trying to tell by having Nazirot come here. Mi garam la avera. What caused this kind of sin? Yayin, wine. Amar koharoa sota b'kilkula, that anyone who see, and we say in connection with the juxtaposition of the teaching of sota in Parshas Naso, that is, it's right next to the Parsha of Nazir. Yazir atzmo min hayayin. One should refrain from drinking wine. One should make a Nazir's vow and refrain from drinking wine. So that is the idea that is being conveyed here. That the reason that we have a Nashim, that we have included this in Nashim, is because when it comes to bad actions that will result in the breakdown of marriage, often they will result from wine. And so as a result, we want to have located here in Seder Nashim the antidote. The antidote is that you want to become a Nazir to avoid the problems. Okay, so Pasach. So now we go back to the oddity of our Mishnah, which is Pasach b'kinuye umifarish yados. The first thing we did was we said that kinuyim work, but then we didn't give any examples of kinuyim. We then went straight into examples of yadot. So Amarava v'isei makadi, that either Rava or somebody without an attribution said the following: Chasuri mechsara. No, our Mishnah is missing some text. And this is how we should learn it. Kol kinuye naziros kenaziros, viyados naziros kenaziros. So any kind of kinui nickname for a nazirot, it constitutes creates a nazirot situation, and similarly a shorthand for nazirot will create a nazirot situation. The Eluhain Yadot, and now here are examples of the Yadot, and so now we pick up again with what our Mishnah says: HaOmer Ahei Harei Zen Nazir. If you say I want to be, then you are considered a Nazir. Now, what does that mean? That means that our Mishnah is going to raise topic A, then it's going to go to topic B, then it's going to discuss topic B, and then it's going to go back to topic A. So now the Gemara is going to ask about it. So, all right. So you've answered the question. You've solved some of the connection issue about how we went from one topic to the other without an introduction. But you haven't really answered why we don't deal with the topics that we raise in the order in which we raise them. So Tana Mehai Desalit. So no, the Tana teaches the most recent topic, and who Mefarish Beresha, and that's the one he explains first. So whatever he talks about last, that's the one he's going to talk about first. Because it's not, and we've got lots of examples. We use the first one every Friday night. But when we say what do we light, what do we use to fuel the lamp on for Shabbos, and what don't we use it? Don't we use umafarish ein malikin beresha? And we begin with ein malikin. So we say b'ma malikin u'b'ma ein malikin, and then we say ein malikin, etc., etc. So clearly, this is not, this is an A-B-B-A situation, like the band. So, and similarly, we've got other Mishnayos. So another, later on in Masechah Shabbos, we say, B'met tomnin, V'ma aim tomnin. What do we use to insulate and what don't we use to insulate? And again, we start with the ain tomnin, umefarish ain tomnin beresh, and we deal with that first. So, what you cannot do. And similarly, b'ma isha yotza, uv'ma enu yotza. And when it comes to a woman going out on Shabbos, what is she allowed to wear going out, and what is considered carrying? So, umefarish lo teitze isha beresha, and we say what you can't go out with first. So again, all three cases are cases of ABBA. So, and all of them happen to be from Shabbos. Yes, exactly. And so that seems to be the answer. Now, of course, the Gemara then turns around and says, 1 second, you pointed out some examples where it's ABBA. I can point out some examples where it's not. Let's take a look. And we can even start with another one in Shabbos. Same kind of issue, right? Of just like with the woman going out and what she wear in order to avoid carrying. Here too, we say that animals have to be careful. You can't have your animal do work for you. So what is an animal allowed to go out with, and what can't it go out with? And yet, what do we say deal with first? Umifarish yotze gamal beresha, and we deal with an animal going out first. That's our first step. So as a result, we're dealing with the first item in our list first. And not only that, but if you take a look at other lists, right? And here we're going to do one from Baba Basra when it comes to inheritance and the right to have others inherit from them. So yesh nochlin umanchilin, there are those who inherit and have the ability to have others inherit from them. Nochlin velo manchilin, there are those who inherit but don't have the ability to have others inherit from them. Manchilin velo nochlin, there are those who can enable others to inherit but cannot themselves inherit. Lo nochlin velo manchilin, and then there are those who don't have the ability to inherit or to cause others to inherit. So, and what do we deal with first? That's the language of the Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Maseches Bava Basra, and we say umefarish elu nochlin umanchilin beresha. We deal with the first situation first, the situation of those who can inherit and cause others to inherit. So Ella laolam tani haka v'tani haka. So clearly, we can't say that there's a general rule. We cannot. Clearly each situation has got to be taken on in a unique manner. So now we're going to therefore offer various possibilities, and we're essentially offering now a second answer to the question of why did we choose to discuss nicknames before shorthands, meaning why did we follow an ABBA structure? So why do we discuss shorthands before nicknames? Thank you. Why did we discuss in detail shorthands before nicknames, even though we mentioned nicknames before shorthand? Thank you. And we say we can go in either direction. So now we need a substantive explanation. So now we're going to offer a substantive explanation. So when it comes to Ela Hassam, when it comes to Shabbos, de isura de nafshehu, where the person himself or herself is going to do some kind of violation, mefarish isura de nafshe beresha. We're going to talk about the prohibition first. So when it comes to lighting a lamp and not lighting a lamp, we're going to talk about that's the person themselves is going to do it. So we're going to talk about what can't they do first. We don't want to, what can they not do before with what they can do. And similarly, when it comes to insulating, we're going to say what you can't use to insulate before we say what you can. And when a woman goes out, we're going to say what she can't go out with before what she can. However, Gabi Behema, when it comes to the animal, which is the case where we talk about what an animal can use to go out, the Isura Aidi Behema Hu Asi, the prohibition is not a direct prohibition by the human. So as a result, there's it feels less strict. And so as a result, we're going to focus on what you can do first. Mefarsh Hatera Beresha. So in that situation, what? No, actually. So it's actually odd because this explanation, you could reverse it completely and say, this should be when it comes to a personal prohibition and a person's going to do a prohibition. So, all right, everybody knows that it's going to be a prohibition. So let's tell the person what they can do, because the person's naturally going to want to prevent themselves. But when it comes to an animal where maybe they'll think this is not so serious, maybe we should say what doesn't go first. So you can actually go in the opposite direction, but this is obviously the direction that the Gemara went in.
The animal's in the barn, the animal has to go out. If I remember correctly, you can't pull the animal out by.
Correct. That's right.
You can open the door and
Correct.
allow the animal to forage.
Right? Correct. That's correct. And so that is, I mean, I don't remember the specific details, but that certainly sounds like that should be the right answer, because we do allow the animals do have the right to eat and go out. Okay, so again, so by animals, so that's why we're going to deal with the permitted one first, because it feels less serious than the others. But all right, that allows us now. And what about the inheritance case? We're going to deal with all the cases other than ours before we get back to our situation. So when it comes to inheritance, Mefarish Iker Nachla Beresha. Look, the point of that Gemara and the Mishnah is to talk about inheritance. And so, of course, we want to talk about the actual inheritance before we talk about the situations of no inheritance, because inheritance is what we're talking about. And it's useful to talk about what you are doing, what the situations where there is inheritance before you talk about situations where there isn't. But then what about here? Elahacha, when it comes to our Mishnah, how come Leferish Kenuya Beresha? Why don't we just deal with nicknames first? Meaning we start with nicknames, let's deal with it first. We see that you can go in either directions. So Elahainu Tam. This is the reason for our decision to talk about Yadot beforehand. Yadot hov asyan lai midrasha, because Yadot we learn it from a drasha, from a pasuk. That the fact that we learn it from a indirect understanding of a pasuk, that's chavivin lei. That is something that we particularly enjoy, particularly appreciate. And so as a result, maybe even to highlight that fact and to emphasize that one should begin by learning things that bring them joy. So then that's why we're going to start with it. And then when it comes to the kinuyim are just rational decisions, as explained by Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and don't have a specific psukim associated with it, so they're not a drasha. So as a result, that's why we'll deal with them second. Well, 1 second. All right, you've explained why we should analyze analyze Yadot before kinuyim. But why not just have Yadot be the opening? Why not say at the beginning of our Mishnah that Kol Yadot Naziros K'Naziros? Why not? Why do we begin with Kinuyim? So V'lichtach Bahon Bereisha. So why not start with that? Why and that way we could do A B, and the A will be Yadot, and the B will be Kinuyim. Why does the A topic have to be kinuyim, and we end up using an ABBA structure? So Tana ki matchil, that the matchil beikar korban, because what's the difference between a yad and a kinui? The difference between them is a kinui is a full statement. It's a full statement using a replacement word for Nazir, but it is a full statement. And so as a result, we want to use a statement that is the core statement of a korban, of a neder that it would potentially create a korban kind of situation. Ula inyan perushe. But when it comes to explaining mefarish yados beresha, then we want to use the explanation that allows us to use the drasha. And so as a result, we'll begin with the core language, and then we'll go to the yadot. And so if we take a look at the rush, it's the second rush on Daf Bet Amabet. It's about 3, 5, 10, about 18, 19 lines down. Matchil be'ikar HaKarban. So again, this is on the outer edge of the Daf.
White line by Tosfos.
Yes, one of the early white lines by the Tosos, exactly. Batchil be'ikar HaKarban. We begin with the concept of Karban. The kinuyim, because nicknames, Lashon Nazirusain, they are actually a language of Nazirut. L'Rebbe Yehuda de Amar Lashon Umotain. Whether you, L'Rebbe Yochanan, whether you go according to Rebbe Yochanan, who says specifically that they mean Nazirut in other languages, L'Reish Lakish Nami, Kevan Shetiknu Chachamim Liyot Nodrim Behen, Ahavi Keneder Atzmo. Since the rabbi specifically said that this language can be used in the place of the word Nazir, it is like using the word Nazir. And so as a result, this is the core. This is the key element of the language. So Aval Yad, Lo Havi Ikar HaNeder. But when it comes to the Yados, when it comes to shorthand, that's not the core element of a neder. She'ein b'mashma'us lashon neder. Eliyad ba'alma. It's clearly a shorthand. It's not the full language. And so as a result, it's not necessarily clear what it means. And so as a result, that's why we want to try and deal with kinuyim. We're going to introduce the topic of kinuyim before yadot. But at the same time, so there's in the end, we see that there's an element of importance to each of these topics. On the one hand, kinuyim allow us to deal with the subject, and yadot allow us to use a drasha, and both of those ideas are important. Okay, so now let's deal, as we're at the two dots, we'll deal with the first of the examples of yadot, and then we'll be done for today. So ha'omer hey ha'reiz and nazir. If you say I want to be, I'm going to be, then you are a nazir. Well, I'm going to be. That could be a Nazir. Dilma ahad b'tanis kamer. Maybe he wants to be, I want to be fasting. There are so many possibilities that he could mean. How do you know that he wants to be a Nazir? So Amar Shmuel kagon shahaya Nazir over lefanav. Oh, a Nazir just passed in front of him. And so when he says, I shall be, he's saying, I shall be just like this guy. Well, 1 second. Lema kasavar Shmuel yadayim she'ein mochichos lo havyan yadayim. Maybe this tells us that when it's unclear what the person means, that is not a valid yad. That is not a valid shorthand, and we won't have anything meaning. Because what did he say? He said that when there isn't a nazir in front of the guy, well, it could mean nazirut, but it could also mean fasting. And so as a result, doesn't that show that when we're uncertain that Shmuel would say it's not a valid yad? So Amrei, they answered that no, it does not have to mean that, because bisman shenazir over lefanav leikalisapuki b'milsa achrina. In that situation, it's completely clear, right? So on the other hand, aval vadai eina nazir over lefanav. Amrina and Dilma ahad b'tainis ka'amar. But when it comes to the other extreme, when you don't have a nazir there, so then it could be anything. So the point is that actually what this answer is coming to say is, on some level there are 3 different possibilities, right? There are 3 different possibilities. So one possibility is it's completely clear. A second possibility is that we have no idea what the guy is talking about. And the third possibility is that maybe he's talking about it. It's not 100%, but there's some indication that maybe he's talking about Nazirut. And so while Shmuel has now clearly told us that in the case where it's definitely going to work, and a case where we have no idea, it's definitely not going to work. When it comes to the situation of what we're calling Yadayim She'enon Machichas, where it's unclear, maybe that's an in-between case where there's some hint at it meaning a Nazir, but it's not definitive that it's a Nazir. And so since Shmuel has not told us anything about that situation, we don't know what he's saying. Vidilma lepotro min hakarbanos kamar. Okay, well, 1 second. How do you know that even if there's a Nazir passing in front of the guy, that in fact the guy means to become a Nazir? Maybe what he's saying is, I'm going to take care of that guy's karbanot. I know that at the end of his time of being a Nazir, he's going to have certain obligations to bring karbanot. And so, hey, I'm going to handle his karbanot. Maybe that's what he's saying. To Amar Belibo. Nah, because we're talking about a situation where the guy tells us afterwards what he had intended. That the guy tells us that he intended that he wanted to become a Nazir. Well, 1 second, well, if that's the situation, meaning what's the story that we're talking about in our Mishnah? We're talking about a situation where the guy said, hey, the guy was passing, the Nazir was passing in front of him, and he says, I shall be. And the person, and we all say, well, 1 second, what does that mean? And the guy says, oh, I want to be a Nazir, just like that guy. So then he's definitely a Nazir. But isn't that obvious? Why do you need to even bother telling us that? What would I have thought? So again, now that we've clarified this, our three situations are the following. If in fact the guy just has a Nazir in front of us, and he says, hey, the Nazir, and the guy, hey, and then we ask the guy, what did you have in mind? And he says, I have no idea what I had in mind. I just blurted it out. I have no idea. So then we'll be in the middle situation of, do we say, yadayim she'enon mochichos, lo havyim medayin or havyim medayin? That will be the situation where we're unsure. But if the guy says, I definitely meant to become a Nazir, well, then clearly that was the intention and he'll become a Nazir. And if, on the other hand, there wasn't even a Nazir in front of us, then everybody would agree that that doesn't work. So those are the three situations that we have at the end of our Gemara. And now, again, our Gemara asks, well, what's the big chiddush? Of course, if the guy says, hey, I want to be like that guy, and then we ask him, what do you mean by that? And the guy says, I want to be a Nazir. Of course, that means that he's a Nazir, because Ma'u Detema, no, it's not so obvious, because what might I have thought? Be'inan piv v'libo shavin. You need to have that the words that come out of your mouth be as clear as your intention. And so that is what one might have thought. One might have thought that, and again, this is highlighting the key lesson that we learned in Maseches Nedarim about how important our words are, that you might have thought that you should only be responsible for your words when your words match your thoughts. And the answer is no. If your thoughts are such, and your words, even if your words don't match them, that Kamash Malan, that can actually be sufficient. And so as a result, even though the guy was not clear about what he meant in his actual express words, we're going to understand it. So, all right, so that's the explanation of a hey, but what's the story with hey na'eh? I want to be, I'm going to be handsome. What is that situation? How does that guy become a Nazir? So that is exactly what we'll begin with tomorrow. And we'll tomorrow also, God willing, deal with the other explanations of all the various other lines. And so if you're as perplexed about them as I am, so you better stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Numasechet.